the multiple interactions from Zoom, time limit and stuff. Okay, so well, if they have questions on the group and they're asking, maybe because we have passed where they are and it's not recorded, you can just help them out. I mean, you guys can help them out in case they have any questions or whatsoever. Thank you, and link them up to materials and whatnot. So continue what I was saying. This here is outside the container. That's what it seems like, but it's actually not like that. It's just overflowing from the container. That is too big for the container to handle, basically. So it's going to be coming out of it. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's exactly what it's going to be doing. So this one is larger than the width of the container. So if this container is actually big enough if this container is big enough to cover this paragraph, it's not actually going to look like this. For instance, let's say we set this is 5M. Now I don't know the my browser default font, so let me make a much better one. For instance, this is 40 pixels now. Right now, I know this is 40 pixels. So if I set the height of my container to be 40 pixels, all right, you can see it's actually in it, but the reason why it is now overflowing, that's why it's crossing the borders, is because of the set styles, the margin and the pixels and whatever. But let's say I make this slightly bigger to 50. Now this 50 can now be able to accommodate the 40 pixels plus the margins and the paddings of the default styles and whatever. So you can see it's going to be in it. So that is also this part of it, but now this is an error. So let's say we have our section, our list. For instance, we have a list of elements here, right? Let's say we have this multiple times. As you can see, this is not one, so duplicate. There's this. Yep, as you can see, it is still coming as one, and it comes out. All these ones here, they are supposed to be in this box, right? And normally we don't know the pixels. That normally we don't know how tall this section is, because here I know now that it's 40 pixels. So what I just have to do is just since 50 pixels is okay for one, and we have like 6 elements here, I can just say 50 times 60, and it will accommodate everything. For instance, let me just show you that 50 times 60 is 50 times 6 rather is 300. So if I put 300, you can see it's accommodating everything. But now if I add one more list, let's say I'll use my set and I add one more list, it crosses it again. Do I have to? I don't want to start going through my code and start looking for 300 pixels and start adjusting it. That would be so difficult when you have a lot of code. So what you want to do is that, provided you don't want to show the user or the client at the other side everything at once, maybe because you just want this, you don't want this to be 300 pixels, you want it to just be 50 pixels, but you want the user to be able to scroll down and to be able to know that, okay, there are more elements here. You can just set the overflow property. You have an overflow property, and the overflow property in this situation here is the default, so we can set it to scroll, and as you can see, when we set it to scroll, we can now scroll in it. Now it has the X bar, that's an X-axis bar, that means your horizontal bar, and an Y-axis bar, your vertical scroll bar, and because it is overflowing on the vertical rotation, that's why we're having the scroll bar as such here. Let me increase this to maybe like 1, okay, rather it's 150. Yep, as you can see, I see that much better. But in this situation like this now, our one is just overflowing vertically, it's not overflowing horizontally. So we don't need this bottom scroll bar here. So what we can do here is we can just specify it specifically for the vertical scroll bar. So we can just put over to Y, and this means that for the vertical axis, it's going to have a scroll, and as you can see, the X axis scroll bar has gone, only the Y axis one is here. And that is just it. But for instance, if we have like a style and we know that we don't want the elements under it to be seen for whatever reason, you actually see that there are a lot of reasons why you don't want the elements in a section to be seen if it overflows. We can easily just hide it by using this hidden property. As you can see, Normally there's 4, 5, 6, but the element these but by specifying overflow units, the container actually just cuts out the remaining ones that couldn't enter, that couldn't fit into this container, and leaves the remaining ones here without the scroll bar. So this is very, very useful. You see that is very useful when you are building on a lot of sites, because you might not expect it when your elements overflow and you want to be able to handle that ahead of time. So that is just all about the overflow property. It's very handy. I thought I'll do that here. And also, we have margins before. Like for instance, this is in this we have removed the margin here obviously by putting the margin to be 0 pixels. Yeah, let me put this. Now, as you can see, we put the margin to be 0 pixels, but we don't necessarily have to put it to 0 pixels. We can just put it at 0 and it will still have the same effect. This is what we know as like having this is what we know as unitless properties. There's properties that we have that by default, even if we don't put a unit in it, it will still assume still assume the unit. So for instance, for margin, the only value that it assumes unit for is 0. So if I put margin at 0, it sees at 0 pixels. But if I put margin at 1 or 5 or whatever, your browser wouldn't know whether is it 5 pixels, is it 5 is it 5 rem, or some is it 5 whatever viewports, VW or VH or whatever. You wouldn't know. But if it's 0, whether it's 0 pixels, 0 rem, whatever, it is still going to be 0. It's not there. So it's going to understand that okay, 0 means nothing, basically. But there are some other properties that you actually do not need to use a unit, even as you are having higher values than 0 or lower values than 0. For instance, we have our class, that's our text here, that's our paragraph here, paragraph students, and let's say you want to specify the line height, that is the line in between the paragraphs, right? So we specify the line height here and specify that 2.5 or whatever. The 2.5, it means that this student, if you have another student below it, it is going to be 2.5 whatever it is. It calculates this in pixels, or it calculates this, as you can see, it has a number, calculates in pixels, or it has whatever it calculates in pixels or rem or m, doesn't really matter. It has standard 2.5, 1.5, 0.5, 0.4, 0.3, whatever it is. It is just the standard. You can just use what you without the units. You can still specify the units. You can still specify at 2.5 pixels, and the browser would render the line height as 2.5 pixels, 2.5 m, 2.5 rem, whatever it is. But normally we usually specify stuff like line height as 2.5 or 1.5 or 1 without the units, because the browser understands how to calculate that by itself. So that is just about unitless properties, and line height is unitless properties. Margin is not. Margin can just use 0, which is a unitless value, but line height is a unitless property in itself. I hope you guys got that right. Moving on now, as we're going back to this margin, you can see that we have 0, we have 1, 2, we have 500 pixels or whatever. The same way we can also have negative margins, so we can also have minus 100 pixels and stuff. Let me show you that. Now in our body here, we have 0 pixels, so it's at the edge of the screen, right? So if we have something like minus 100 is too much. Wow. If you have something like minus 10 pixels, right? You can see that it is not at the edge again. It's more like it is overflowing outside of the screen. Let me make that more obvious by putting maybe 30 pixels. Okay, yeah, you can see the C has appeared, the student has appeared, as if like we are shifting it away to the side of the screen. Now that's because the negative margin does the opposite of the positive margin. While the positive margin adds more white space to the container, negative margin removes white space and also removes part of the elements from the container. So this is basically saying that we have our whole screen here, but outside it, we still have our 30 pixel worth of screen. You understand what I'm saying? And negative margins are not recommended. You can write full-blown size, extremely mass size without using negative margin. Though you can use it, and it is not as if it's bad to use it sometimes, especially when you feel like especially when you feel like okay, you need it, but It's not advisable. So just try and stay careful. I'm just showing you this. So in case you enter a pick and I just so that I've set my CSS code to be like this in the particular structure, and I want this element to shoot up small. But if I try and adjust other properties of other elements or the parent container or whatever, it will actually spoil the look and feel of other elements too. I can just set the margin of that element or maybe the padding of that element to a negative value, and it will shift only itself to that portion and that to that place I want it to shift it to. And that makes it easier. It's not advisable because if you know that you're inside that kind of problem, it means that you did something wrong. Maybe you didn't structure your code well, but in the time that you've been inside that problem or whatever, the nice trick on your sleeve. So that's basically all about it. Now, all this, like using this color here, this green, you using, let's see, what else are you using? Yep, using variables calculator. They are parts of the newer version of CSS. You know, we have CSS2 before CSS3, and CSS2 is actually the older version of CSS. You very very hard to use CSS because it is very restrictive. It doesn't have a lot of properties. It doesn't have the freedom that CSS3 gives us. So CSS3 is more like the new standard. It was a very long time ago, but it's still the newest standard to date, and they just continually add properties to it. So you can go to the internet and check out the specifications and see properties, a lot of properties, and read about them and try and use them for yourself and understand, okay, these are the works out, these are the because you use them a lot in JavaScript. Your JavaScript courses when you're trying to change, maybe like you have a section here and you want the section maybe after every 5 seconds, you want it to be displaying a new property, maybe a new sliding another section, those kind of like banner kind of field. It is basically CSS that you're using. JavaScript is just going to tell your browser, okay, I want this element to disappear here with CSS. I want the element to react to slide in and reappear. And you can use that. You can use your JavaScript to do things like transitions, but the transitions are handled by your CSS. So that just instructs your browser to use what CSS property that is used at each time. But your CSS properties are not actually handle the transition. So don't forget that JavaScript is not like it's JavaScript to help you to style. It's JavaScript just help you to time or to adjust the feel and of your browser to make it look more lively. And what you are doing by adjusting the feel of your browser is basically adjusting the CSS of your browser and the HTML code of your browser. That's what JavaScript is. More like a plugin, but it's a full-blown language. So I told you about CSS3, like the new specification and stuff. We also have a very important one, and that is the flex box. The flex box is extremely important because it helps us to align elements without going through different awful means. For instance, you know that in our browser, you know that we have a specified width, but we don't actually have a specified height of the browser window. I don't think you'll notice that. Like for instance, why is it that anytime you enter the page of any website and you can see that you can scroll down, but scrolling to the side is always not an option unless they want you to scroll to the side. But scrolling to the side is almost always not an option because the browser itself has a specified width. But no matter how much, because let me show you, no matter how much we continually add elements, let's say we have 1 million paragraphs, what we have to do is scroll down the screen. That is the thing we have to do. Let's say we have this. Okay. All right. All we have to do is scroll down the screen. Let me remove this margin, negative margin here. Let's put it to 0. Yeah, all we have to scroll down the screen. But if we have the elements now at the side, maybe we have this one, and maybe it is a lot of ease. I don't know that ease. I'm okay. Let's not use that because obviously, okay, yeah, let's use that. All right, let's just put it outside here. that to be in the body section, and change this to P. Right? Yep. So let's reload that. Okay, yeah, as you can see, it's going to overflow, obviously. It's going to overflow, obviously. But this is not what we want. We don't want people to be looking at a long text and they will just be like scrolling to the side. So what most of the time what the browsers do is the browsers wrap this text. The browsers wrap this text in another container. Now, for instance, like I said before, your browser has a body tag, a body element, and that is the whole body of the browser, and you have all your elements in it. But when you are styling it, when you are like making it responsive, when you want to reduce the elements as it gets to smaller screens, you see that you just having all your elements laid out in your body um, scope or body container is going to make it a little bit difficult to style, because you just want to be able to change one property and every element in it to be able to change. So what you can do is that, okay, you can set this body and give it a class to be a wrapper. Right? That means what this body does, this body want this body to do, that you want this body to act as a container that we can shrink and enlarge respective to the rest of them. So let me show you what I mean. We have this as a wrapper, so we can just change this wrapper. It's still the same thing, basically, right? And now in this wrapper, we have we have the whole information of, we have our own HTML code. Maybe the HTML code is maybe it's a student. I've been using students a lot. Maybe it's a student table, like I said before. It's a tabular form of whatever the student is also, or whatever the page is doing, right? So you can basically have a division, and in the class we have our students wrapper, right? And all this nonsense that we have been doing since, I just remove it and put them here, and it doesn't change anything, obviously, because we haven't styled anything. So us putting it here now we can style this student wrapper and style this wrapper related to usual. But now this wrapper, obviously, we want this wrapper, maybe we want it to be our margin 0 pixels, but we don't want this class, our elements in it to be margin 0 pixels. Let me say that again. No. All right. So what I mean is this. Now, if you want this margin, let's say you want every element here, right, to be maybe having let's say having a width here, a margin here, rather, a margin like 20 pixels here, 20 pixels at the other side. So that means you want the element to be centered, right? You want the element to be in the middle, kind of like a blog feel. We can't do that with our body element, because our body element is the whole browser itself. You can't, if you slim down the body element, there's nothing outside it. You feel what I'm saying? So there's no need for us to do that. So that's why we are now, that's one of the benefits of us now putting this in the whole information that we have in another wrapper class. And this is going to be like our second wrapper. Maybe that's going to be our student wrapper. Or maybe, for instance, you want to blow out, you want these elements here, right, to be defined. Let me just remove this. Let me just remove the width and height property here. Let me just remove this here and move this. Just put 2, right? And this border, let's put it here. Okay, that was quite unexpected. All right, we have this as this. Then we can just easily set the border here to be our border, right? And we can set it for this. Okay, I think that's all. Students, I think that's all. Okay, yeah. So, and the footer. Let's not forget about that footer. All right, yeah. So now all of them have the same border now. Now, if, for instance, let's say we want our code, that want this section here, we want it to be in the middle, we want all these sections here to be in the middle, and we want to blur the background. So that means only this section in the middle will be focused. And our student one, our sections will be focused, the rest of them will be blur, so that to bring up, to focus the elements into for the clients to see, maybe attract the client or whatever. We can't do that with our body elements, but we can do that if we put it in a wrapper. And let me show you how we do that. Not the blur part, but like how to center the element. But the blur part is another property that we have to start just, and I don't start explaining the properties in deep down, because it's something that you rarely use. You don't see many sites that don't blur their backgrounds or whatever. So but you can read up on it. You can read up how to blur the background, or maybe blur the foreground of your web page. Maybe give it some kind of visual effects. So now we are here, and now we have this students wrapper, right? Let's copy this class. Okay, let's make it better. Let's make it more chronological, right? Now this student wrapper. Now this is margin 0, right? So because this is margin 0, that's why they are staying at the edges of the container. Now, if we set this margin 0, we want to set this student wrapper. That means this division itself. And remember, this division itself contains our information. See if we remove this division, the basically not on the screen, right? So if we set this division itself to, we have one set of margin here to be 0, or maybe to be to be 0. It's going to give us the same thing. If we set it to be 5 to 4 pixels, as you can see, it's going to adjust itself. As you can see, it's adjusting itself not just to the left, but to the right too. So you can set it here to be 40 pixels, and you can see it is doing what we wanted it to do. Set it here and set it here. It is actually very, 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 very helpful for us to do that. And even if we set the width of the student wrapper, let's say we set the width to be maybe 140. Oh, 140 is a lot. Let's say 140 pixels. That's actually so small stuff. Let's say 740 pixels. Okay. And when you set the 740 pixels, you know that the browser renders to left to right, normally like normal text flow, normal document flow, top to bottom, left to right. So you want to stop here. So that means this width is not doing what we want this margin to do. What do? We can actually adjust this. We can actually fix this, because if you only use margin, if you don't use this width, use this margin, we're basically just setting it to be 40, set it to be 40. But what if you want to set this place to be maybe 740 pixels? We don't want to start measuring them now. Maybe this is going to be 80 versus 80, and I subtract it from the whole viewport weight. It's going to be this. But that means if I now reduce the viewport, I'm having a different width here. You see, it's going to be compounding stuff. And you know, when you are designing pages for people, you're going to design the measurements as like to the exact measurement they specify. So we're going to have the width of the container to be this, and if you have the width of the container to be that, we can easily just set the margin to be 0. Since now we already know the width, and if you set it to 0, it's going to go back to where the body is, right? Then we can put it as auto, and this auto centers the elements for us. As you can see, it has really centered it. We don't know what this is, we don't know what this is. The auto arranges that for us. It also tells that, okay, this is 140 pixels, this is 740 pixels, right? Remember what I said, the margin has 4 properties, 3 ways rather of taking in properties and values. This is either specified as 1, and if it is 1, it will take everything here. Let's say this is 0, everything is going to be 0. If it's 0 and 1, that means top and bottom is going to be 0, left and right is going to be 1. And if it's 1, if it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, that means it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. You know what I'm saying? So now that we have done, now I understand. Now this 0 means that, okay, we don't want any margin at the top and at the bottom, right? What this is doing here is basically, like I said, is basically the the injected style, but we don't want any margin here, so we're putting it at 0 pixels, right? And you don't need to put it at 0 pixels, just put it at 0. And this auto basically tells the browser, okay, we have this we know the width. I already set the width already, right? And we want this to be centered, but we don't know the how much width what is the width of the browser, like how much space we should reduce to how much manage we should have so that it will be centered. So the browser basically calculates that and does that for us. So this is very, very, very useful. I mean, a lot of sites have this that they do their text here, they have a sidebar, you have another sidebar. This is extremely useful. So it's just one of the tricks that are out there. So now that we understand what that is now, we also understand that because of that, now we can help us better yet make stuff responsive. Because now instead of us to be reducing each element width, we can just reduce the container's width and style the elements related to that container's width, and everything will shrink and increase at the same time, reducing our use of media queries, because using too much breakpoints and media queries actually makes your code very hard to maintain. You want to use less media queries and use more media queries. So I think this class is about 7 minutes, and I'll just wrap up, sir. Yep. So right now we can now use different technologies that have been there. We can use display. We can use flex. I would have loved to teach you about this flex and grid, but this flex and grid, they are huge topics. They are very huge topics that it's either you learn them yourself or we have you class for just flex and grid, because it's a very, very, it's used in basically every site that is there right now, but it's a very, very, very deep section in CSS that you need a lot of properties that is specific for each of them, specific for each of the technologies. So let me just take these two. I'll just take these two here. That is the display, and I'll take media quiz, and I'll see if I have time for position. All right. So what your display does, let me just speak about that. The display, what the display does is basically just tells us that okay, I'll change how this element is rendered on the screen. So remember when I said that this body here is a block element, this section here is a block element, your paragraph is a block element, your links, that is your anchor tags. Your anchor tags are inline elements. Remember when I said that? Yeah, it still holds true. It still holds true actually. So, but in the CSS now we can actually change those properties. And the way we change that is by setting the display properties. For instance, another person, can you mute your device or something? I'm not mute you here. Okay. So moving on, Sha. Now once said that, now this is the wrapper. Now, okay, look at this. This is our list here, right? We have one and one. Now, like I told you, your list is a block element. So your list spans the entire width of this container. So if the container is this, it spans it. If the list element was outside here, image was outside here, and it was directly to span the width of the screen wrapper. If your list was outside here, it will span the width of the body and to span the whole screen, basically. So what we can actually change that, and we can just make the list fall in line like a normal anchor tags, like a normal links tag that's like this. For instance, let me show you. This is a link. As you can see, this is a link here. It's a link. It is in line with this, but this one here, it's a paragraph. I mean, this is from year to year, and I'll show you that. For instance, we have our students red. Let's say border. Okay, no, it's not here. Sorry. Students red. Yep, border. Okay, yeah, it's actually done like that. So let me put this here. Okay. So now, as you can see, it's going to be outside it, obviously, but this one here is going to be spanning the whole width of the container because it's a block element. So, but I can actually make this one come down here and become an inline element, and I can just display that, change it to be an inline element. So if I just come here and say display an inline, you see it has come to the normal text flow that's come down here, and this is now an inline element. That's very useful because if you have like our navigation bar, our home our about our contact us. For instance, let's say this is home, about, contact us, and terms of services, right? Or this service, whatever, right? And we have this as our, let me call this here. Okay. Right, these are list items, and we come here and we have those list items, right? And they have a border. No, they don't need to have a border, just have a background color of blue, right? Their text color is white, right? And yep, and look at how it's looking like. Yep, it's looking like this because there's no margin between them. So let's say we have our margin, and we have our margin to be we can also make the margin top, for instance. Like only we just want the top of this place, only the top of them rather. Yeah. Should have a margin. So we can make that margin top. We can make that maybe like 10 pixels. You can see it gives it space here. So now you can see it like this. We can now change the display to be inline block, because we have different displays. We have inline block, we have our normal block, that's normal block, and we have our we have displayed none. None does this makes the content disappear. So as you can see now, is that home, about, contact, or terms of service. This terms of service does not come here because of overflow, because it doesn't, the width of this container has been defined, and this terms of service cannot enter this place. So it moves down. So if I should reduce the font size here, let's just make it something static, maybe something like, that's too small. This is 16 pixels. As you can see, it's like this. We put a little padding. Let's say 1.4 m, right? And our border radius. So let's make that 0.7 1.4 m, right? And our border radius to be 0.7 m. Yep. And this here can be at the top of your screen. It's not as ugly as this though, but it can be at the top of your screen, home, about, services, like a normal web stuff. As you can see,